What's going on, YouTube? My name is Mr. Crippled, and today I'm going to be talking about Hecate. Now, before I get into the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you'd like to keep up with any future content, I will be leaving a link to my Discord and my Twitch in the description below. Now, I made a previous video kind of just going over how this character works, good builds for her, what cards are on her, and how I felt about her initially. And at first, I thought this character, she was unique. She had some supportive options. She also had some DPS options. The ult was really funny to use, and I thought she at least had some potential. And now that time has come along, this character sucks. Like, this character just straight up sucks. Easily one of the worst characters in the game. Other than maybe like Hades, because at least she does have some utility. But overall, this character is horrible. Before I really get into that, I will go ahead and name off her strengths. First of all, the ult. The big thing about the character, the portal ult. It is nice, especially in like a arena or like laning phase, or kind of like in a laning phase setting where you can kind of force them to come closer to you. You can help your team get out. There's like a lot of utility that can come with the ultimate, and the fact that you can move freely between the two to kind of mix it up, does really help her as far as like her quote unquote maneuverability. And the fact that she does have a pretty decent shield that takes care of magic damage, and the big boy spell, her two only being on first of all only being on 8-second cooldown, and with how much damage it does, is kind of nice. I will admit that. However, there's a lot of glaring issues that Hecate has. For one, she's supposed to be a support, which is fine, and where her supporting comes into play is supposed to be played around her 3 and the stun on her 1. The problem with that is twofold. One, her first ability has two different ones, the DPS option and the stun option. When you need this, you won't have access to the stun option or the damage option whenever you want. They cycle between each other, depending on what was the last ability you used. So if you use the damage one, the next one's going to be the stun, and if you use the stun, the next one's going to be the DPS option. The problem with this is that it makes it to where when you need the stun, you're not going to have it, and essentially you have a 7-second cooldown between both abilities. So you have 14 seconds before you can use your next stun, which is absurdly long. Not to mention, it's really more like 15, 16, because you still have to take into consideration casting time. And the stun on top of that can only hit one enemy at a time. And so whenever you need to have the CC, not being able to cycle through it is typically with other gods that they put in the game, especially with how they want her to play, is kind of baffling to me, because it makes it to where it's almost impossible for her to be needed to be good in almost every situation. And then on top of that, again, with the shield, as you probably heard me say a second ago, the shield blocks magic damage. And it says so in the description. Grant yourself or an ally a magical shield absorbing magical damage. And it even says twice, magical shields are HP shields that only absorb magic damage. So if you use her as a support, or you're trying to deal with anybody else who is a physical DPS, the shield's not going to do jack shit for you. On top of that, it's not even multiplicative. It only has a max health of 300, which is nice. Don't get me wrong. A 300 health shield is nice, but once that late game or even the mid game comes along, that 300 health is nothing. You'll chew through that so quickly, and that's even if you're the magical DPS. If you're the physical DPS, you could just straight up ignore it. The other bad thing about this character is her passive. Now, the passive itself on paper isn't bad. She can basically put a purple pot on an allied tower, which gives health and mana regen, right? And then she can also put a buff on an ally who recently got a kill, to give them extra strength and intelligence. And this buff lasts for 300 seconds, which is a nice amount of time. However, here's two things wrong with this. One, you basically never take advantage of this passive. There's quite literally no point to do so. Now, if you're hunkering down in tower, Cool. It's a nice little defensive passive. But if you're not and you have pressure, you're not going to get any use out of this. 2, the recently killed god gaining, or the person who recently killed somebody who gains the strength and intelligence buff is nice. However, by the time you can really put it on anybody, either the fight is going to be over, or there's not even going to be a fight within those 300 seconds, or a fight that's even worth taking in 300 seconds. Now, the second part of the passive, gaining the strength and intelligence, is probably the better of the two, because you can just put it on an ally and then y'all will be chilling. But then the problem for me, at least for a DPS option, is that you can't even put it on yourself. So if you're clapping, if you're doing a bunch of damage and you're the one doing everything, you can't take advantage of your own passive because you can't target yourself. So you have to rely on your own teammates being good. Now, don't get me wrong. In a team-based game, especially in higher levels of play, your teammates will start getting kills on their own and they will start being a little bit more competent. But the enemy team is also going to be competent, being able to play defensively. So you can't always rely on that part of the passive. So in most games, you're not really even going to have the opportunity to use this. Along with the passive, right? Outside of the ult, she has no maneuverability. Plus, she is a mage. So even though she can play the support class like other mages can, she doesn't have any defensive mechanics besides the shield that can help her actually be a support. If you think about Baron, he can decrease the enemy's strength and intelligence and also make it to where he takes reduced damage. He can speed up the team. He can heal the team. And he has a root for the team that he has access to roughly every 8-10 seconds, and that's without CDR, right? Aphrodite, even though Aphrodite is not as strong as a support as Baron, she still has the better ult than Hecate. She still has a heal. She has a stun and a slow and a pushback, right? And she can share her protections with the person she's attached with. So she could still somewhat protect the team and make the team tankier. I think that's really it for all the mage supports besides Hecate. Hecate doesn't have anything like that. And the two defensive options that she actually does have are so situational that they borderline on being useless. And then on top of that, she herself is squishy. So even if you build her tanky at the early and mid game, she's not going to be tanky enough to deal with the support and the carry running at her, or dealing with a Sobek, or dealing with even Hercules or Khepri. She's not going to be able to compete with them as far as the defensive options, because everybody else has something so much better than her. Well, let's take her at a solo laner perspective. Again, she has no maneuverability. Her clear is god-awful slow early. It's god-awful slow. And again, besides the ult, if the jungler and the solo decide to be aggressive on her, she has no way to really defend herself. Besides, again, the stun or the shield, and those are situational. That's okay, so let's take her at a DPS perspective. Well, again, she gets outcleared by most mages. She could barely even full clear by the time she gets to level 5, and it still takes her like 2 abilities to do so. Getting to level 5 is going to be a pain because everybody can outclear you, so you're destined to be behind with this character. And the only time she's relevant as far as a DPS option is once that super late mid or late game comes along. And during those points, again, other people can kill way faster than she can. So there's not really a point to have her in mid either. And then her cooldowns, as good as they look, they're not that good. She will, and then on top of that, one of her primary DPS abilities is a skill shot. And if you miss, you're SOL for 14 seconds because you gotta cycle through the stun. So overall, this character is just, she feels so incomplete. Like she's missing like the shield itself, first of all, should just be a shield. It should not only be good against magical damage. I don't know who the fuck thought that was a good idea, but the fact The fact that it only absorbs magical damage is the dumbest thing ever, especially if it only absorbs 300 damage. A Zeus is chewing through that. A Poseidon is chewing through that. Anybody with physical scaling is completely ignoring it. Um, I think she also needs a change to her one. She definitely needs to be able to cycle through the two. They've done it with characters like the Morgan or Morgan Le Fay in Smite 1. They've done it with King Arthur. They've done it with Merlin. I have no idea why on a better engine they don't do that with Hecate. It doesn't make any sense why she can't just cycle through the two. That would actually make her a better support and actually help her in the supporting department because then she could just stun you. And then if the worry is that, oh, well, it's already on a relatively low cooldown, increase the cooldown by 2-3 seconds. That way, it's still at least kind of long and she still has access to those stuns whenever she actually needs it. This is just a minor gripe. I think she needs a new passive entirely as well. The extra healing, the extra pot on the tower is nice, and the extra strength and intelligence is nice. But let's be real here, that extra health and mana regen is not really gonna do anything for you, especially if the team is willing to dive you, and in most cases they're definitely gonna be willing to. So that health potion is not gonna do anything for her. I don't know exactly what she would need per se, but I do think that the passive needs to be reworked. Heck, make it to where if she's going to be a DPS, they did something similar with Achilles. Give her like an Achilles passive. Make it to where she had to choose at the fountain whether she wants to have extra protections and health regen or extra speed and magical scaling. That way she can actually be a threat as a DPS and an actual support as or an actual guardian as a support. Give her the option. Doesn't necessarily mean that she actually needs that, but it would be nice if they changed something about it. And then finally, this is just a me thing. I think the ult needs to be quicker. The ult is so slow. Like most cases, yeah, you can hit some people, but or in some cases, yeah, you're gonna be able to hit somebody, but it's so easy to react to that that and hell, you can completely ignore it with just beads and purification talisman, and a good support is gonna get both of those, or a good support is gonna get purification talisman, so that makes this ult dang near negligible. Dang near, because CDR and every once in a while to be able to hit, but it comes out so slow anyway that it feels like you just walk right out of it, which is a horrible thing to have as a god like this. I think they should just take half a second off of it. I think it should just come out in a second. That way, it can actually be useful. Um, Especially since it doesn't really have like at least like a massive slow on it. I think it just coming out quickly would be nice. But that's about it. All I have for Hecate. Easily, she's cool, especially with a god like Aladdin coming out and Mordred being in the game. Even though Mordred's kind of mid, at least he's interesting and actually viable in some situations. Hecate to me is just not viable at all. If y'all have any concerns about this character, let me know what you think they should change about her. Thank y'all for watching, and y'all take care.